Hi, welcome back to my channel. My name is Laura and today I am doing a shelf wrap-up. Remember those? This is wrapping up shelf, I believe it's 39. I will put the number up somewhere on the screen, but it's the last shelf that I had selected to read from. The reason that this stopped is because this whole room has changed. It used to be kind of piled high with all of the manga that didn't fit on shelves, and we've literally rearranged our entire house to put two new full-size bookshelves, like the ones behind me, out in our, like, another spare room. So now they have migrated, and some of our manga is not actually in this room anymore, which means that we no longer have 54 shelves to choose from. We now have 66 shelves, not including our Gekika shelves or yaoi closet, and this was a project that my sister and I were doing where we had put the numbers of each shelf corresponding written on paper that we folded as origami, and then selected every month those numbers, and then that number would kind of determine what shelf we would kind of primarily concentrate on reading. I was finding it really good because it was helping me pick up a lot of titles that I was sort of putting off, or you know, just because when your collection gets this big, it's overwhelming to choose what to read next, and you kind of just stick with the things that are really comfortable. So this was definitely helping me read a number of different things, but our collection has changed quite a bit, and so I haven't really felt inclined to continue. I really do want to get back at it, but it also requires kind of refolding 66 bits of origami. But one of the things that I've learned through doing this is that because we buy manga so frequently, the shelves change quite frequently. It doesn't sort of stay consistent. So I'm kind of looking at a different way to approach this, and also I would like to include my Gekika and yaoi closet as part of this project, so and single issues too. I'm completely forgetting about them, but I would like to include things in sort of a slightly different way. So I'm still thinking about it. I may try alphabetizing it, so maybe just do like a range of alphabet. But you know, there are some alphabets like Q, which I'm going to talk about, where I only have like maybe 10 series at the most in Qs, and then there's like the Bs, where I probably have 30, 40, 50, you know, series that have that start with the letter B. So I'm just trying to figure out what that would look like, but it will continue. It may not happen again until the new year, but I do at the very least want to wrap up the shelf that I last talked about, which was basically P through Q, possibly a little bit into R. I think there's an R in this pile. I think it was shelf 39, possibly 41. I can't even remember anymore, but I will put it up on the screen. And if I can't even remember what shelf I read, how am I going to remember these manga that I read? We will see. Probably not very well, but I can probably give you a very broad gist of what I read. So I didn't read, well, I read a handful of titles off of this shelf, and let's just get on in and talk about them. So the first thing that I read were Volume 1 and Volume 2 of Pink Innocent. This is by Kotori Momoyuki. You can tell from the title and the cover that this is a fairly young demographic shoujo manga. This is basically a story about these two characters. This boy, sort of a popular boy at school, he's kind of average and poor, and this girl is really bubbly and exuberant, a little bit dumb, but extremely wealthy, and she has fallen in love with this boy and is pursuing him in a very just sort of naive way. She's sort of throwing her money around in a very innocent and not intending to be you know, hurtful or anything, but drops in on him, you know, in her helicopter and stuff like that. So there's another title that reminds me of this, where the roles, of course, are reversed. Something about wind or kaze or something. I can't remember, but it seemed really similar to this. This was a very happy, cute title. The boy definitely by the second volume is starting to warm to the girl, and she's starting to kind of figure out how to be kind of more of a normal person and not kind of going like overboard, although she really, really does. It's, you know, pretty young, pretty cute. I probably rated this about 2 stars out of 5. So it really isn't, like, it's not the best thing out there, but, you know, if you're the right demographic, I think it would work for you. The same goes for this title. I read Volume 1, Volume 2, and Volume 3 of Pixie Pop or Gokun Pucho by Ema Toyama. I know I've read something else by Ema Toyama, but I just can't think of the title at the moment. This is basically, I have talked about this before because I was reading this sort of at the same time as my recommendations for Magical Girl series. This is a Magical Girl series. This is basically the story about this little character here who is a tea fairy or drink fairy. She has been collecting the emotions of humans in this special drink. When she drinks it, she will mature and grow up. By accident, this human girl drinks it, and so now she's gained this magic ability that whenever she drinks anything, that drink bestows on her special powers. At the beginning of the series, she confesses her feelings to a boy in her class. He immediately rejects her, and so she's feeling really low, and so she uses these magic powers to figure out why he's rejected her, and she falls in love with him even more. Again, very, very young demographic, shoujo manga, really cute. I like the relationship between the girl and the drink fairy. I think it's quite nice, and it's 3 short manga, so you know, Magical Girl series, because it is so formulaic, and, you know, shoujo manga tends to have a lot of formula in it, this one doesn't overdo it, so you get a lot of the tropes of shoujo manga and Magical Girl manga in this, but it doesn't go too long, so I think this is a fun one, particularly if you are fairly young, probably preteens would appreciate this the most. And I ended up reading, complete reading this series. This one is QQ Sweeper by Kyousuke Motomi, who is the same author as Dengeki Daisy and Beastmaster, and is there anything else in English? I think that's it. This is basically the story about a boy who's sort of like a janitor of the souls, and there's a girl who comes to school. You find out that she is homeless for some reason, and she has taken on a job to basically become becoming a housekeeper or kind of a maid at his family home. She has done something that everybody in the family is quite intrigued by, in that she has entered this like soul space wherever they go to clean out people's souls, and she has come back unharmed, unscathed, and so they're very curious about her, and so she ends up sort of working in the family business as well, while they try and kind of figure things out. In addition to that, the boy in question, who is a classmate of hers, very serious about his cleaning job, also has a experience of when he was younger, he knew a little girl, and something happened, and she ends up getting what he believes lost in that dark space, and she is gone, and so he's kind of traumatized by that and doesn't want to get close to people. And there, of course, is some resemblance to this character, so that's sort of like what the big question is. Who is this girl? Where did she come from? And nobody, of course, believes the boy about his past experience, so is there any truth to that after all? So I read Volume 1, Volume 2, Volume 3. I actually didn't care for this series all that much. I didn't think it was anything new or special. I think I rated it 3 out of 5 stars. I think that Kyousuke Motomi's other series are stronger, and I've read this premise so many times that I didn't feel like it was doing anything. But then Kyousuke Motomi was asked to move to a new magazine, and that magazine gave her some new specs, gave it a new title, gave the story a new direction. It is now called Queen's Quality, and it is just a continuation of that story. It doesn't really finish in those 3 volumes, but there is more kind of intrigue, there's more darkness, there's more questions and mystery. It just that slight change in the perspective of the story just gives it so much more depth and so much more interest. So if you read Queen's Quality, or QQ Sweeper, and we're kind of iffy about it. Queen's Quality is so much better. It's so good, this first volume. I do have volume 2, haven't read it yet, but I hope to soon. And I think more than volume 2 is out now, but I'm not buying manga at the moment. I will have to wait. But yes, this volume 1 was really good. I ended up reading Kyouko-chan, the Earth Invader Girl by Ueda Hajime. This is the same author as Furikuri, FLCL, however you call it. This is basically a mecha story, but kind of in a shoujo experience. I feel like Ueda Hajime was sort of thinking, how would girls like to read, you know, mecha manga? Oh, here's what I'm gonna do. And so it feels a little bit insulting to me when I was reading this. Like, I felt a little bit like irked, like they were trying to patronize girls and what a girl's experience in like piloting manga or piloting mecha would be like. This is basically a story about some sort of a futuristic world. There appears to be some sort of space battle or space police going on in the sky, and all of a sudden this robot kind of drops down. One of the boys in the class, who's more adventurous and naughty than the rest, basically either takes the robot home or ends up piloting this robot and kind of evading the police or whatever. I don't remember exactly what the plot was. Partway through you find out that there are more mecha. These are sort of a special mecha that have been designed by some scientist, and they, I think, are all supposed to be piloted by girls, so it is unusual that this one boy is piloting this main mecha, and it probably is supposed to be piloted by his sister later on in the series. That's sort of what the hint was. But all of the characters are very cutesy, kind of reminds you of Powerpuff Girls, and they all have sort of stereotypes of maybe different cultures. Like, there certainly is a First Nation type mecha, you know, complete with headband and feather, that seemed a little bit insulting or racist. So it just, there was something off about this title. It was confusing. The art style was unique, at least compared to a lot of manga. It definitely had more of an American feel to it. I definitely felt more like the FLCL manga, but I'm glad we don't have any more of this because I really didn't want to read any further. I read the first volume of Pumpkin Scissors by Ryotaro Iwanaga. Since then I have picked up more volumes. I don't think I have volume 2, so I don't think I can continue yet, but I really enjoyed reading this, and I do know that you can buy this off of, I think, who has this? Kodansha? This was a Del Rey title, so probably Kodansha has this, I suspect. I think there was some agreement there. And it is quite long, like I think it's into the 20s at this point, so I would be tempted to pick this up in a digital edition just so that I could read the whole thing, but it's a lot of fun. It is kind of a post-war type story, and there was a special force during the war, and they all had this special ability, and now, you know, after the war, people are just sort of trying to figure out what their place is, and of course there are still factions that have kind of broken off and still want to continue warring because, you know, peacetime it's hard to kind of reclaim peace after you've been at war. So there's people who are, you know, taking advantage of this new peacetime. So this main character here, he was part of this secret faction. I think it was called Pumpkin Scissors. I can't remember exactly. Basically, he has now joined up with a peaceful post-war group that is going around and trying to break up any of these pockets of unrest, which are, of course, led by these powerful characters who were part of his faction back then. So it's really interesting. I really liked the characters in this. They reminded me a lot of Library Wars, which is a favorite of mine, so I really want to read more of this. I thought it was a lot of fun and really interesting kind of take on the whole wartime story. I don't remember too much about this, but this is the final volume of Platinum Garden by Maki Fujita. I have written a blog review for the series before I picked up Volume 7. Volume 7 is the complete available edition in English, but of course it's about 14 volumes if you actually bought it in Japanese. Tokyo Pop went out of business or stopped publishing it before it was done. This is basically the story. It kind of is a Fruits Basket story, although not half as good. And it's basically about a girl who meets this guy who has a very strange family, and he is sort of the center of the family in that he can, I believe, I think he can temporarily raise the dead. I think that's what the premise is. There isn't very much of that in this, except for that he has a lot of family pressure, and he's a very, you know, grumpy guy, and she can kind of see past that, blah, blah, blah. But the family characters are what sort of makes this interesting. The character here on the cover is actually the grandfather, even though he looks like a small child. He has a condition where he looks like a child. He's the best character in the series, and this ended off on a cliffhanger, if I recall. Now that I don't remember it, I don't feel quite as upset about it, but I remember being quite upset when I was reading this because it was over and it was like, it's finally getting good. It took 7 volumes for me to get really into this story. So that was irritating, and since there is no more in English, now I have to learn Japanese, I guess. I don't know if this is really worth it. It definitely wasn't half as good as reading Fruits Basket, but this last volume was really quite entertaining. So I also read Rai, or Rai, not entirely sure. This is by Sanami Matoh, same author as Fake. This is actually a story that crosses over with Fake. There is a short incident where some of the younger kind of sidekick characters meet up with the younger sidekick characters from this series and have a little adventure, but this one is more fantastical. So it is a story about a detective, and he ends up becoming sort of the guardian of a 13-year-old boy who has telekinetic powers. I believe others in his family may have those powers as well, but something is going on, and I can't remember exactly what it is. It's a short volume, didn't really stick with me, but it was really entertaining, particularly because the month before I read this, I had read Fake, so it was more fresh in my mind. It has now been several months since I read this, so it is really fun. If you like Fake, you should definitely pick up Rai. And then the last thing that I read was the complete Prophecy, or at least what's available in English. This is by Tetsuya Tsutsui. So I got Volume 1, Volume 2, and Volume 3. Everything I read this for the shelf was actually quite short. This is a story I really, really liked. And the ending is so frustrating in such a good way. Like, you're just left like, ugh, couldn't you have resolved this? Couldn't you have unpacked this better? But it was so intentionally frustrating that it was really good. It's basically the story about a character who is masked with a newspaper, is posting online on kind of social media sites that they're going to perform these sort of vigilante type acts, going to take his revenge or her revenge on someone who is kind of acting up or taking advantage of the weak by doing these really antisocial things like setting off bombs or hacking websites, stuff like that. And then, of course, it is more of a cat and mouse thing in that there is a detective who is trying to track this person down and figure out what is going on and how this is happening, and trying to take control of the situation. I think it's really good. It is very good, like, back and forth cat and mouse. The explanation for it is just really irritating. But I really, really enjoyed this. It's not as, I don't know if I would say it's as dark as you would expect. There's definitely some emotional baggage in this story, and it definitely is one of those stories of, like, defending the weak. Yeah, I thought it was quite good. The very first story, though, you can really feel the flames of resentment by this author to people who bootleg and copy and distribute copyrighted material. So if you are someone who does that, I would recommend, well, I'd recommend reading this, because maybe you will see the errors, but yeah, wow, you could really feel the flames from this author about it. And I thought it was quite remarkable, that first chapter. But yeah, I really like this one. I had a lot of fun reading it. Didn't know how it was going to resolve, and yeah, I can't. There's supposed to be a second part or a second title, not translated in English. I would love to read it too, but what can you do? I have to wait for someone to translate it. So yeah, I really enjoyed this. I would recommend it. So that's it. That's what I read on shelf 39, I think. But finally I can wrap that up. I really liked doing this project, so definitely will be seeing more videos like this in the future. Hopefully I can continue doing it the way that I have been doing it. I think it actually worked really well. Like, I wouldn't normally pick up, like, it's such a mix between, like, you know, kind of a dark seinen mystery and like fluffy shoujo magical girls, like all of that in kind of the same reading period. It was all sort of within a couple of days of each other. So yeah, it really kind of stretches what I could read, but I definitely have to rebuild that little box of random papers. Yeah, because this collection changes quite a lot. It's more dynamic than you would think, and now has grown quite a lot since starting that project. So definitely forthcoming, but done for now, and I'm glad I have that off my plate. So that's it. If you've read any of these titles, I'd love to know what you thought of them, particularly if you've read Prophecy. I'd just be really curious if anyone else sort of had the same feelings about it as I did. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye for now.